Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Soft Skills Salon with your host, Diana Kowarski. In this episode, we are joined by Dr. Murat Kristal, an Associate Professor of Operations Management and Information Systems at the Schulich School of Business at York University. Diana and Murat begin by exploring the ways confidence can be defined. They continue their discussion by examining the importance of one's vantage point, whether an entry-level employee or CEO, and its impact on empathy. They conclude their discussion by looking at how leaders may empower, offer freedom, and build trust with their teams using a whole person approach. Now let's have a conversation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soft Skills Salon podcast, an audible think tank on soft skills. I am your host, Diana Kowarski, because, as I say, conversation is the currency of communication. So today, let's have a conversation with Dr. Murat Kristal, an Associate Professor of Operations Management at the Schulich School of Business at York University in Toronto, Canada. He received his PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2005. Dr. Kristal is the founding director of the Masters of Business Analytics at Schulich and the Masters of Management in Artificial Intelligence, also at York University. Both are programs at the Schulich School of Business. Currently, he also serves as the director of the Center of Excellence in AI and Analytics, also at Schulich. In 2016, he was named one of the top 40 professors under 40. He has published in top operations management journals throughout his career, and he works with various companies in North America and Europe to help them achieve their analytics, AI, and digital transformation goals. Hello, Murat. In addition to all of that, I do consider you one of my friends and have had the privilege of working with you and for you in a variety of ways. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, Murat, there's a lot to be said for this soft skills world that we're going to be playing around in during this episode. And in particular, we're going to start off with a question that I am interested to hear your thoughts on from your perspective. And it is, how do you define confidence? What comes to mind?
Well, the confidence is a loaded question in itself. Depends on where you are looking confidence, where you're looking from, what is your vantage point. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if you're talking about careers, I guess this podcast is more about people to, extend their careers. I'm hoping that you're going to be more successful by listening to these careers.
I think that's a great way of looking at it, certainly.
And if you look from that perspective, that it also depends on where you're at your career, at which stage you are at your career, right?
Yes.
As an entry-level person, let's just think about an entry-level person. What confidence is for her can be different than a manager, senior manager, or a CEO. Because in order to instill confidence with your coworkers, there might be different expectations that you need to put out to the world or to your colleagues.
So with some of your students who potentially then are on the newer end of their career paths, mm-hmm. What have you seen as demonstrations of confidence?
Clear articulation of what you're thinking and then clear communication skills. Mm-hmm. Is a very strong sign of confidence. And especially for entry-level people, you don't need to necessarily know everything. That's for sure. But not knowing everything should not make you feel, less or inconfident.
Right.
The way you carry yourself, the way you communicate the things that you don't know is a sign of confidence at an early stage in your career. And obviously, if you couple that clear communication with good deliverables, sound deliverables, right?
Mm-hmm.
On target, then your confidence or the way that you are perceived by others will improve over time. And at some point, you're going to feel natural.
Mm-hmm. There's a
Um,
lot. There's a lot already in your answer, and there's a couple of points that I'll piggyback on if you don't mind.
sure.
And the first one is around, and while we are focusing perhaps at someone at an entry level of their career path, to my experience, this might also be applicable at different points within everyone's career journey, and that is the confidence to communicate about the limits of perhaps one's expertise or one's experience or one's knowledge. In other words, communicating, as you said, about what we don't know. So perhaps it's that we need to have some knowledge about knowing what we don't know in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And that is harder than you think, right? That is harder than you think. That you are self-aware in a way that, hey, I don't know this thing. Okay, it's not the end of the world, but how do I position this? Is this something that I can learn? Is this something that I can spend time that I can learn? And at the same time, how am I going to communicate the parts of this thing that I don't know? How am I going to communicate whether this is something that I will be able to learn by myself, or is it something that I need to alert other people that, hey, another specialist should be working on this topic because it's completely out of my realm. Like, I mean, if you ask me, can you deliver a baby tomorrow? Chances are no. So I should be able to tell you with confidence that no, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to be able to deliver the baby. But having said that, if you're stuck in the highway in LA where the traffic has literally stopped and where no ambulances might reach you, you might still end up doing it, right? So it is a bit of a situational when you would say, hey, I don't know. And when you say, you have to do it, like you have to figure it out. But confidence comes from a real assessment of your capabilities, where you can do them, where you cannot do them, and then being honest with yourself and communicate that honesty in a true to your senses style to your peers. I mean, that's like coming from a negative place where we started with, I don't know. What about the things that you know, what you can do actually? Again, in that case, I think the confidence then comes from not making things complicated, but breaking down things into bite-sized pieces where the people across from the table from you would understand.
Certainly.
A lot of people think that using complex words or things that others don't understand, they think, see, I'm confident. I know my stuff. I'm just talking to you. The way that I look at it is that you're just throwing out stuff out there because you actually do not trust yourself as much. That if I really understand what you're talking about, you might think that I might find holes in your arguments.
I think that there's a lot of very great points to expand on. In fact, I know there are a lot of great points to expand on from your answer. There's two in particular. The first is, anecdotally, as someone who teaches in and around communications, I can tell you that when I am coaching or training individuals around clearer communication, that there's a direct correlation between someone's confidence and the large multi-syllabled words that people are suddenly throwing out there that does not convey anything to the trained listener other than the absence of confidence and perhaps an overcompensating with some language that is usually vague or complicated. And while I'm a big fan of words, I like a big word. Oftentimes, to your point, it takes a great deal more self-awareness as well as knowledge to simplify or to distill so that a message is approachable and clearer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the other piece that I thought was worthwhile was the points you made around assessing. You indicated that conducting an assessment of your own capabilities is another part of that self-awareness. And once you've done that inner work, perhaps we can say that self-assessment, it's only on the heels of that process that you can then articulate to others. And I agree very much so, because often we are somewhat challenged in finding the language to articulate to others what it is that we do not know in a way that still represents ourselves well. And there's no suggestion here that we need to know everything, as you said, especially someone at an entry-level position, because to be frank, you can't. It's impossible. It's a fallacy from the start. Yet it's that self-assessment that will hopefully yield the language that you can then inform how it is that you are understanding your knowledge, lack thereof, or your own specializations to other people. Is that somewhat along the lines? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
okay.
As you move along, like we started with the entry level, and then let's just, as you move along, I guess the most difficult position to be in is somewhere in the middle. You're not an entry position level. You are now managing people of your own, but you're also reporting to a person or persons higher up. So you're at that level. I usually find those positions to be the most stressful, and self-doubt, which will instill, in confidence. I mean, not confidence in yourself, because you need to instill confidence on the people reporting you while being questioned by your bosses.
Yeah, by leadership at the same time.
By the leadership at the same time. So when you're questioned, you have to be able to respond to them in a way that is clear, that is influential. But they are going to try to, find holes, because that's what their job is. And you need to instill that confidence. And your confidence then also relies upon other people's work, not only yourself. Because at an entry level, if you're an analyst or someone like that, you only rely on yourself. I do whatever I need to do. I present it to my boss. Right. That's it.
And sometimes we're at that entry-level people don't have the clear appreciation of just how much integrity and how much they are self-reliant at that early stage.
And then, but let's think about the person that receives that report. Now, that person will look into that report and then will have to sell that report to her boss, and how you're going to confidently sell it. And it's not only explaining to your boss somebody else's work, because you're the conduit, right? You're the conduit between the two parties. But how you're going to do it honestly. I think one of the things about confidence is honesty. If you are honest, you may not win the big bonus shortly, but in the long run, you might come at top.
I like that idea of honesty being a long game. And I would suggest to you that middle person that you refer to, that people leader, I often suggest that they're qualifying for some danger pay. And as you pointed out, they're in a precarious spot where there's high dependence on what can be a diverse set of skills amongst their staff. And then they themselves, again, as you reminded us, need to necessarily champion that work moving upwards. So that honesty, perhaps, that you suggest that in the long game will have yielding results that we are in our favor, perhaps that honesty starts with the self-assessment, and having some reflection there that brings to the surface what our skills are or what our skills are not, or what our experience may or may not be. And then, of course, extending that out to others. let's move on to our next question, which I think we may have touched on in a circuitous way, but it's a great question for us to move on to nonetheless. And it says, what does success leading others look like to you? So as a leader in the many roles that you play, Murat, what does it look like to you, leading others?
The way that I look at it is that leading others start with choosing your team or creating a team together.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you are given a team, then assessing the strengths of your team members. In today's world, I don't really think that you can force people to do things that they don't like or they don't want. It is going to fail in a year and a half, 6 months, a month. So you need to inspire people. And guess where people are mostly inspired to be successful? They are mostly inspired to be successful when people listen to them, when people let them do things.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is my idea. Can I do this? And as a leader, do you have trust in your team members' abilities and capabilities that they are the correct people to do what they are talking about? So if you have a strong assessment of your team members, their capabilities, and if you trust in them, then leading others is actually enabling others to succeed, right? And that's is exactly the opposite of you're going to do as I say. It's more about, let's have a conversation about what we are trying to achieve here. And what do you think we need to do in order to achieve this goal? And then the person that who is reporting to you would say A, B, C, D.
Mm-hmm.
And if you trust them, you should be saying that, okay, go do it. Because if you give them that freedom, they are going to strive. And that's going to make you great as a leader. If you're just like, oh, you're going to do it this way or that way.
Right. What I hear are four distinct points in your answer. I heard that we, in the first point, either create a team if we're afforded that opportunity, or when not, then engaging in an assessment of the skills in the team that we perhaps have been assigned or that we have inherited.
Yeah.
The next of these 4 points was the importance of listening and how individuals might bring their thoughts, ideas, suggestions, and the courtesy perhaps and the commitment to hearing them out and to listen to that. The third factor that you mentioned was the trust. And, trust is a complicated concept when it comes to our work relationships. However, if the trust as our third point is then coupled with your fourth, where you said leading others really is enabling others to succeed, I appreciate those 4 points, Murat, because you're contextualizing those 4 points in your next statement was about how, as an example, let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about how we can move this forward, or let's have a conversation about what it is that we can decide upon as the deliverable or the output of this next move or this relationship or this project, et cetera. And at its very core, this podcast is attempting to be one conversation amongst hopefully many, many out there on the surface of the planet about moving forward some of these ideas. So let me ask you then about the significance of conversations and that very small little unit in terms of leading others. Do you have any thoughts on the role of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, conversation is a two-way street, right? And if you're the leader, you're one person leading multiple people, which means that you're not going to be able to do everybody's job because you don't have enough time in the daytime to do their job. So your job is to have a two-way conversation with the people who are reporting to you to understand what they are trying to achieve. Also to tell them what your goals and what you're trying to achieve, to find a path forward. Mm-hmm. And for that conversation to be productive, people should feel that they should be able to speak freely. For whatever the reason, if they are not speaking freely with you, at some point, it's going to break down. And that, again, goes back to establishing trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As a leader, pulling yourself to the background,
Right.
pushing your people out there so that they also start to feel, okay, like this, the thing that I'm doing has importance. And my leader acknowledges my contribution openly to everyone. Those are the things I believe will lead into a good conversation with people who are working for you or reporting to you.
I agree with you absolutely. And I love that image of pulling oneself as a leader to the background and allowing people who are on your team to occupy the foreground in terms of space. So I think there's a lot there in that image that says how leading others is about others and what it is that we're doing there, as you said, in terms of also acknowledging accomplishments and that conversation, how that small piece of iterative relationship building does come down to perhaps choices that the leader is making in one conversation, and perhaps then how that leads to the next conversation. As you said, understanding and informing to find a path forward. Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes people are afraid, even as leaders, if they give the credit or if they shine the people working for them too much, that they are going to lose the credit, or they are not going to get the credit. But I think, I mean, at least from my perspective of being an effective leader, for me, results matter. Right. So if you're a leader, if you're achieving the results by empowering the others, then you achieve your goal. Because at the end of the day, it's the result that matters. Like if I'm your boss, I'm going to give you something and you did it, or you did it by actually empowering the person under you, shining through, good for you.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you as the leader made that decision to empower the person reporting to you to deliver that. It's still your success.
Right. And so, as you said, empowering others so that there can be success from both the leader, but as a whole team, perhaps at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. The next question we're going to wrap our heads around is, where have you seen or experienced empathy in your career? Where does that play a role? Empathy. I like how thoughtful you're being, Murat.
Because I'm thinking if there is any empathy that I received.
Is it the absence of empathy that comes to mind?
I mean, the empathy that I received, I think in my career that I can think about, again, empowerment. Okay. When a leader understands your capabilities and then gives you trusts you and then gives you the freedom to deliver. Mm-hmm. And I find that is empathy towards your capabilities, right?
Empathy towards your capabilities. So how does one have their capabilities known then?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, leaders should work like human resource managers most of the times. Like, it's a leader is not, writing a report. A leader is talking to another person who's going to write the report. So understanding that person inside out is going to give you the ability to create some empathy with that person.
We sometimes refer to whole person approach. Does that?
Yeah. Like, and empathy is not sympathy, right? Empathy is actually understanding the circumstances that they are in. It's not like you don't need to be their cheerleader. You need to just understand where they're coming from so that you can have an unbiased, or try to have an unbiased. Everybody has biases. So yes. Like, unbiased is a misnomer. Everybody has their biases. but at least you can be aware of your biases and then try to understand the situation that those individuals in. And if you can do that, I guess like you're working like a therapist, more or less, as a leader.
Let me ask you, has your experience during this COVID era perhaps offered you opportunities as a leader to flex your own empathy in trying to figure out where others are coming from as circumstances and both familial and community changes came along with some of the requirements of managing one's own life during this COVID time? Did you see any more opportunities to demonstrate empathy with people you work with or people who work for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in a way, the world, I mean, it's very interesting, even with the work from home thing, right? Like that we experience work from home. And now people are choosing a little bit more of an hybrid approach because they just don't want to be secluded from the rest of the world day in, day out, because it drives you nuts. Like you need to go to the office at some point, talk to your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
But this work from home also signified the importance of outcomes and the results rather than punching a card. Right? So if you're now focusing on the results, then you can show empathy easier because, hey, you have to be at work at 9:00. And then somebody can say, I don't really care whether if you're at work at 9:00. Do you have the right report for me at 9 a.m. at the time that I asked you?
Mm-hmm.
If you deliver that report on time, on a professional way,
mm-hmm.
I don't care where you are. And that all of a sudden, because the rules in a way kind of box you in a certain way of thinking, in a certain way of showing empathy. Maybe you would have empathy for an individual, but hey, what you did was against the rules. What do you want me to do for that? But now you have a little bit more flexibility to understand where they're coming from and then looking into where they come from and how does that affect the outcome.
Right.
Because essentially everything is based on, or at least in the corporate world, is success. If you're successful, go for it.
Some of the teaching that I do, I think, echoes these immediate comments that you've provided. And what I do is often ask people to think about product versus process. And what is the process by which you are working? And for some of us, we've found out during COVID that I work best not wearing socks in my kitchen at 2 a.m. Okay, great. Others have found I work best when I'm in the office, whatever that looks like, and I'm there from 9 till 4 p.m. However, both of those processes, as extreme or silly those examples may be, can both yield the product that you're looking for, right? Yeah. And so if you are attaining a deliverable, a product that is of, at least meeting expectations, if not exceeding expectations, and of a quality, and certainly in your world, there's a great deal of emphasis on the reliability and the validity of the data itself, which is well beyond my own understanding. The process can be very different as to how people bring you that product, right?
The only thing is that you need to make sure that people will feel that they are treated equally. Because the process will change, or the process will be different from one individual to another individual. But you need to make sure that both individuals will feel that they are treated equally. When you are relaxing the process, you still need to have some parameters around it because you're focusing on the product. Yes, that's the correct thing. But at the same time, I need to feel that the way that I am treated by my boss, he treats or she treats my colleagues the same way.
And that returns to the comments you made earlier. And I thought it was an interesting one, was every leader is also a human resources manager, right?
Yeah. You work like a therapist.
And I remember your bio. I don't believe you are a therapist. And in my bio, I am not a therapist either. However, I assure you, I can absolutely empathize with at times feeling as if I am providing mock therapy to have other people see where their goal may be or how we can work together best, right?
Yeah.
Murat, I ask my guests if there's any resource or article or writing or video that they have within their purview that they think might be of value based on our conversation. It might be even some of your own work. Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of a resource that you think might be of interest to people?
As you know, I work for Schulich Executive Education Center, and SEEK has a great instructor called Diana Kowarski that talks on leadership and communication classes. They should come and take your courses.
Yes, thank you very much, Murat. And that was a lovely plug, and I appreciate that. Murat, I also appreciate greatly you taking your time out of your very busy day. I know exactly how well sought out you are in terms of your expertise. So I am appreciative, very much so, of your time. And I know that all of these great comments that you've provided will be of value to our listeners as well. So thank you very much, Murat. And I appreciate all that you've brought to this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for listening to another dynamic and informative episode of the Soft Skills Salon with your host, Diana Kowarski. Please consider subscribing to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we also encourage you to visit our website and social media links, which you can find in the show's notes. We look forward to bringing you another episode. And remember, conversation is the currency of communication. Bye for now.